Hi everybody, and welcome to Big Joe's Journal. My name is Joe Tilden, and I am the host of this program. Well, we're headed into summer, and thank God, it's been a long time in coming. But the 21st, I believe, the 21st of June, 22nd, we go from spring into summer. And while we're having a hot, humid day today, this will beat ice and snow any day of the week. And you can't complain. You know, during the wintertime, a lot of people spend big bucks to get down to Florida to get this kind of weather. So let's enjoy it while we've got it. Summer seems to whip right by. You know, in just a short time, we'll be back into fall, and then, you know, what comes after that. Well, today, I want to talk about things that happened in the past week or 2 weeks. As you know, our so-called leader went up to Quebec, a meeting of the G7. In other words, 7 of the top economical nations in the country, or in the world rather. You know, it's the United States, Canada, Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And he was late arriving up there, and he also left early. And the only thing that he did up there was to be an embarrassment to the United States. He's trying to get the G7 to invite Russia back in. He's probably the greatest spokesman that Vladimir Putin has. And he is advocating very, very strongly to try to get the other members of the G7 to readmit Russia. Russia did belong at one time, and then when they stole Crimea from the Ukraine, they were booted out. So Mr. Trump wants to take care of his friend Mr. Putin and get him back in. And fortunately, the other 6 members did not quite agree with that. So, of course, you know, like a spoiled brat, doesn't get his way. He's got to say all sorts of derogatory things about our allies, sort of distance ourselves from our allies, which is the wrong way to go. A particular person that he attacked was the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, who was the host of this meeting. And he said some things about Trudeau which, of course, were not true. Most of the stuff that, well, I want to think of a name that I can say that I can have on family viewing hours. But anyway, most of the things that jerk says are false. And the things he said about Mr. Trudeau were false. The big thing is on these tariffs that he's slapping on our allies, and particularly on our close ally, Canada, and Mexico, which more or less is an ally of ours. And what he is doing, he's taking our allies and our friends, and they're beginning to wonder about what kind of a country we are, what kind of leadership are we going to provide. And he didn't do anything to help it. In fact, he was, as I said at the beginning, as usual, he was an embarrassment to the United States of America, a huge embarrassment. So he leaves early, running his little tweets, and he heads down to Singapore. And there he's going to meet one of the most vicious dictators of all time. And that is Jong Un from North Korea, who Mr. Trump praised as a great statesman, and, you know, again, a whole host of lies. Kim Jong-un out of North Korea, his people are starving to death. People want to eat and families want to get fed. The male members, and in many cases female members, become part of North Korea's army. And matter of fact, as a result of that, North Korea, I believe, has the 4th largest army in the world. And they are continuing to build. Well, you had the big summit in Singapore, a lot of hype. And as usual, when you get a lot of hype, you know, it's doomed for failure. I couldn't help but going back in history and recalling the meeting in Munich, Germany in 1938 between the British Prime Minister, Melvin Chamberlain, and the dictator of Germany, Adolf Hitler. And Hitler's promise, you know, just give me a little bit of land and that'll be it. There won't be any trouble. Chamberlain goes back to England waving his worthless document saying, "We have bought peace in our time." Well, we know that that document was completely worthless. And the agreements reached in Singapore, none of them really benefited the United States. Trump agreed to discontinue our military exercises with the South Korean Army. And he also agreed to withdraw the 23,000 troops that we have stationed in South Korea. What did North Korea agree to? Well, yeah, we're going to dismantle our system eventually, somewhere down the line, and yeah, you can come in, send inspectors in eventually. We'll talk about that later. Let's talk about that on a lower level. If you take a look at Singapore, you can put it maybe on a par with the Conference at Yalta in 1944, when Franklin Roosevelt gave away all of Eastern Europe. As a result of that, of course, as you know, here in the United States, we passed the 22nd Amendment, which limits the president to 2 terms. The one exception being if you're the vice president and you succeed to the presidency and serve less than half a term or less, then you are entitled to 2 terms on your own. But nobody's going to be there more than 10 years. Well, I think we see the same thing in Singapore. Trump agreed to most of the things that North Korea wanted. The end of the joint military exercises with South Korea, which the North Koreans and the Chinese said were provocative. How about that? Provocative to a couple of dictatorships. And he agreed over time to pull out our 23,000 troops that are stationed there. Well, if you analyze the whole thing and evaluate it, North Korea came out on top. First of all, this ruthless little dictator became a player on the world stage by having a head-to-head meeting with the leader of the most powerful nation on earth. And he got some concessions. And I kind of wonder if he went there, if he had any idea how many concessions he would get. Well, the usual pattern, you know, they praise the big fibber and tell him what a great guy he is and everything else. And he swallows it. And what happens? He makes foolish agreements. The Pentagon is very, very disturbed about the results and the agreements that Trump made at Singapore. Very disturbed by it. Because it certainly gives, over a period of time, it gives North Korea almost an open door into South Korea. The South Korean Army is equipped and trained by the United States, but their numbers don't come anywhere near equaling the numbers of the North Korean Army. As far as North Korea being able to go much beyond the Korean Peninsula, that's something we don't have to worry about. They don't have an air force, and they have a very minuscule navy, same as China. If China had a powerful navy, although they're focusing on building up their navy right now, they would have taken Taiwan long before now. But the fact that they don't have the facility of transporting troops across open water has been the big preventive that has kept them from invading Taiwan and pretty well taking that over. And the same thing with North Korea. Militarily, they represent a big problem to South Korea and to a large extent to Japan. Now, they're not going to be able to land troops in Japan, but they can hit them with their rockets. And also, they claim to be able to have an intercontinental ballistic missile that can land anywhere in the continental United States. Well, those are estimates. Would they fire off one of those? I really don't know. I don't think I don't think Kim Jong Un, from what we have seen of him lately, he's far from being a stupid man. In fact, he's smarter than the guy we got sitting in the White House. The fact that he was on the diplomatic level, supposedly a guy with no diplomatic experience, he was able to go down there and outmaneuver him. And get pretty much, I think he got more than what he expected to get. He not only got himself established as a world player, he got himself center attraction on the world stage. But the fact that we're no longer going to be holding joint maneuvers with the South Korean Army, and eventually we're going to withdraw our military from South Korea, he got what he wanted and then some. So we look at what happens in Singapore, and it was an embarrassment to the United States. Our so-called leader, he embarrassed us in Quebec, and then he followed up when he went to Singapore. And he got outmaneuvered. I don't care. He pats himself on the back, says how smart he is and all that, but actually he's just a big dumbbell. And he got outmaneuvered by this little fella from North Korea. Following his tweets against Justin Trudeau in Canada, two of his stooges, of course, followed up with even more cruel, untrue tweets about Justin Trudeau. And Mr. Trudeau, I thought he handled it very well. He announced, as he should have as the leader of a free country, that should the United States impose major tariffs on Canada, that they would retaliate. He mentioned that Canadians are friends with the United States, and they probably are our truest friends. But he said they won't be pushed around, and I don't blame him there. I think he was right. Our leadership, horribly wrong. And of course, shortly after that, the two stooges, one of them Ludlow, Trump's financial advisor, and I can't think of the other guy's name, but one of them kind of tried to make up for what he had said and said it was in the spur of the moment and so forth. And the other guy, there, Ludlow, claimed to have a heart attack, and he wouldn't be able to publicly withdraw his words. But you know, this is of such great concern that in a short time, we've gone downhill. And I think it shows, and I hope it shows, that come these elections, the so-called off-year elections, the people got to get out and vote. Get involved. Because people didn't get involved is why we're in the mess that we're in now, and why we've got that idiot in the White House that we have now. I've always had great respect for the office of President of the United States. Even when George Bush occupied it, he made a huge mistake, a huge, huge lie in getting us involved in Iraq. And we're paying the price, and will for many, many years. Consider all the military that gave up their lives, for those that were badly wounded and will be physically handicapped for the rest of their lives, and all for something that was a total fabrication. You know, but in other ways, I think George Bush's problem was that he listened to Dick Cheney too much. And Cheney was cut from the same cloth as Trump. Of course, you all know the story when Cheney went duck hunting with a friend of his down in Texas and accidentally shot his buddy in the face. But he did a lot more in encouraging George Bush to get involved in Iraq. And that is something probably that we will never recover from. But in comparison to the occupant of the White House now, he makes George Bush look good. The two things that Trump has accomplished: number one, he makes George Bush look good. And number two, he goes down as the worst person ever to serve as President of the United States. For years, that title belonged to the 15th President, James Buchanan. You know, James Buchanan was president just before the Civil War. And he always had the reputation of being the worst president that the country ever had. When George W. Bush came along, he sort of challenged him for that honor. But the guy we got now takes that honor hands down as the worst president we've ever had. So we have to just wait and see what's going to happen as far as the situation in Korea is concerned. And we also have to wait and see how our allies, our friends, retaliate for the tariffs that the president is putting in place on them. And it's something that bothers me in all this. In the background sits Congress. Congress would, if they would move, they could nullify these tariffs. But you got a Republican-controlled Congress. They sit back. They let that dictator in the White House have his own way. And you know, folks, you got to look back at history. We got to look back at the 30s. Let's take a look back at Nazi Germany and how Hitler came to power. You know, it's just like Trump has read the book and he's following along. You look at the folks he's got in his cabinet. The only one in his cabinet that amounts to anything is the Secretary of Defense, and that's General Mathis. I was hoping that General Kelly, as the chief of staff in the White House, would put a rein on Trump, maybe put a muzzle on his mouth to begin with. But I can see why General Mathis is just shaking his head. And while our military leaders in the Pentagon are deeply concerned, they wonder what he's going to give away next and where we're going to go from here. Well, one of Hitler's greatest successes was in trying to mute the press, talk about fake news. And his public relations man, Joseph Goebbels, of course, was very, very good at promoting the idea of fake news in Germany and getting partial of the press that was very much in Hitler's favor. We have the same thing now. Look at Fox News. Fox News is not unbiased. Fox News puts out the news that favors the current administration. That's how Hitler came to power. And that's how Trump is trying to stay in power. And you sort of wonder, you know, about his stooges that are helping him out, especially right here in Rutland. And I'm not going to mention any names, but we should be concerned. And the way to change this thing without having another civil war is do it through the ballot box. Our Constitution remains supreme. It's the law of the land. And we've got to look at our Constitution, what it allows and what it doesn't allow, and it will stand up. But to do that, the people have to stand up with it. We have to look and see what's happening and be very, very concerned about it. And we have to be involved. This is a democracy. At least at the present time, it is still a democracy. The Gestapo-type tactics that are being used in many parts of the country, they turn off the vast majority of Americans. Think of the border crossings in the Southwest. When parents cross the border with their children are taken away from them and put in, well, we don't call it indoctrination camps, but that virtually is what it is. Go back to the 30s, when the Nazi government took children away from their parents and put them in training camps where they had the Hitler Youth. Just about every child born in Germany in the 30s was taken away from his parents and indoctrinated in the Nazi doctrine. Well, as we look at this thing in the southwestern United States, that is not what this country is all about. People shouldn't have to come into this country and have their children taken away from them. That is the singular most Nazi-like project of the Trump administration. Now, he went on TV the other night and said, well, that's the Obama administration. No. That's the Trumpy administration. Trumpy, Adolf, Trumpy. I don't know, it just totally disgusts me that here in the United States, when people are coming here seeking freedom, trying to get away from dictatorship, trying to get away from harassment, they come across the border, their kids are taken away from them and put in, you might say, internment camps, and they go to another camp. They have to wonder. The parent has to wonder, what is happening to my child? All you folks that are parents, put yourself in their place. And your kids are taken away from you and sent, you don't know where they are. You have no way of getting hold of them. They have no way of getting hold of you. You have to wonder if you'll ever see them again. That's not what we're about. No way is that what we're about. But that's what we are becoming, and will be if Trump and his cronies have their way. The Germans used to say Heil Hitler. Here we'll be saying Heil Trump. We're coming close to that. There is a way to prevent it, but it's going to take every citizen of this country to exercise their right to vote come November of 2018. Call off-year elections. And one thing I'm glad to see is that there are a lot of women that have stepped up. I was glad to see that a lot of our teenagers and our college students are stepping up. And they're going to take back this country. We're seeing it go downhill now. We're seeing it become a second Nazi Germany. And we need to turn the course of events and straighten things out. And again, you'll do that by going to the ballot box in November and electing members to Congress that are going to act, that are going to say enough is enough, that the country has gone downhill far enough, and let's end the slide and turn it around and bring us back to be the nation that we propose to be. You know, in the Declaration of Independence, second paragraph, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." How does that contrast to what's going on in this country right now? Children taken away from their parents, probably never see them again. When we pledge allegiance to the flag, we talk about one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Those are our ideals. And those are the ideals and the goals that we should be working toward. We're getting there, slow but sure. We've made some wicked mistakes in this country. Slavery was a huge mistake. And it took a bloody civil war to solve that problem. We have made other mistakes in the 1930s when a boatload of Jewish refugees came from Germany seeking asylum in the United States. And we turned them away and sent them back to Germany, and where they wound up in concentration camps at Auschwitz, at Treblinka, and at Belgium. That was a huge, huge, huge mistake. Since the Civil War, civil rights have come gradually. slowly but gradually, but we have been making progress on it. If we look at the number of African Americans that are serving this country loyally in Congress, we have had an African American, at least 50% African American, Barack Obama, as the 44th President of the United States. And there's a very, very good chance that we may have a young senator from New Jersey who's an African American as our 46th president. We have taken steps forward, but unfortunately now we're slipping back. We're going 2 steps ahead and 1 back. But sometimes when things are the worst, they can turn out for the better. Maybe people have seen what happens when you don't get out and vote, what kind of a government you get, what kind of leadership you get, and what happens to the country when you get that kind of negative leadership. Instead of being the world leader now, we're looking like the world's biggest fool. Not a good position to be in. Not at all. So, this brings me back to my favorite theme. Democracy requires activity. People have to get involved. After all, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, we call this government, in this democracy, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we look at the situation in Washington, and we wonder if there is any remedy. Well, we know there is, but we've got to get out, and we've got to exercise our rights. We've got to get out and vote. And we don't have to go all the way to Washington to see it. We have a situation in Montpelier, possibility of government shutdown come the 1st of July. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. The governor talks about the wonderful surplus that we've got, the wonderful surplus coming in, but as long as the legislature is in special session, that surplus is being eaten into. Every day the legislature is in session in Montpelier, it's costing the state $40,000. Well, if you keep on going, that big surplus that the governor crows about is going to be gone. So hopefully the governor, he has vetoed the budget that the Democrats came up with, the revised budget. And the legislature is going to be meeting this week, and hopefully they'll have enough votes to override that veto. You got to get at least 100 votes in the House to override the governor's veto. And have that, you will have a budget. And let's get it taken care of. Let's not drag this thing out. And especially, let's not have a government shutdown on the 1st of July. You know, you stop to think about it. What happens if the state shuts down? How many state employees are going to continue to work without being paid? Let's take our correctional officers, our prisons. What's going to happen there? Where's the money going to come from to pay our correctional officers, and probably the most dangerous job in the state? Some of them are working 16-hour shifts because it's hard to get people to go into that profession. When you go to work, you don't know how you're going to come out or what shape you're going to come out in. So you got that. Are we going to shut down all of our state parks? We're going to have to come the 1st of July. You got July 4th weekend coming up, which is probably the biggest weekend of all for camping. And so we're going to close down our state parks. Pretty stupid, pretty dumb. So, hopefully, this week, the legislature will override that veto, we'll have a state budget, and the state will continue to function and continue to operate. You know, let's not get as bad as the federal government. That's bad enough. But here in Vermont, we don't need to follow that example. So let's hope the legislators do the right thing, override the veto, let's get a budget and get going. With that, may Almighty God and His infinite wisdom continue to bless these United States of America. God love you. We'll see you all next week.